Okay, I will start and welcome, thanks everybody for coming back so quickly. And Trevor, we are glad you're here.
Thank you for dinner. Appreciate it very much.
So will try to fill in as the sort of quasi-chair here, and we'll consider ourselves called to order. And looks like we need to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Huh, Michelle? Let's do it.
Oh, Michelle. It's yesterday.
I already knew every word. I didn't know.
Amanda, you want to start us?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call?
Tim?
Present.
Teresa?
Here's up.
Teresa, sorry.
Present.
John?
Here.
Emily? Here. Stacy?
Here.
Looks like we have minutes. Wow, that's quick minute production. Good job, Michelle. From April 8th of 2025. Give you a second to look at them, but somebody would like to make a motion. You're always welcome to do that, to approve.
I'll move that the minutes of April 8th be approved as presented. Support.
Motion and support. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Public comment not related to items on the agenda. Mr. Mayor, are you public
Here today, but we're just invited guests, Commissioner Johnson, myself, Michelle, and Mark are just invited guests. They will do their elections here shortly.
Right. And no public comment, no public hearing, so I will turn it over to the board. We need to elect a chair and a vice chair, somebody who's comfortable sort of running the meetings as I did. And then we'll let you guys take it and run with it. So it's up to the five of you how you'd like to proceed on nominating somebody for those positions.
Who's interested?
Not it.
No one goes. This is what we do at our house.
I think a retiree who really knows city business would be the best.
Oh, that's not a good idea. That's not a good idea. I spoke to that last meeting.
Time to change your mind.
Somebody nominate somebody, let's go. We gotta go home.
Nominate Emily. For chair.
Other nominations? All in favor of Emily Coles as Chair of the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? You lose, Emily.
Please, sorry.
I will turn it over to you if you would want to go from there and talk and see if anybody, if the group wants to elect a vice chair.
You didn't say you wouldn't be vice chair.
I'll nominate Jonathan.
I move the nominations be closed.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think we have that squared away, and we can help with, iron out some of those bumps, Emily and John, as we progress. But you guys are way more talented than it takes to be the chair and vice chair. We have a lot to learn. We've figured that out. We already knew it, all those types of things. Trevor is here, and I'll let him introduce himself as our go-to staff person, so to speak, contractor, that helps us through all of these processes as we go along. So Trevor, please.
Absolutely. So my name's Trevor Woolett. I work for Fleet and Vandenbrink. We do a lot of other work for the city, and I have spent the last 25 years doing brownfield redevelopment and environmental consulting. So I kind of do both. There's some connection between brownfields and environmental. Originally, brownfields were primarily environmental projects. The program expanded a number of times, and most recently, as you probably heard, housing was added to the brownfield statute. So you're starting to see a lot of movement on that stuff. So I'm going to run through brownfield redevelopment, kind of what the roles and responsibilities of the board are, and some of the next steps that you can consider as a board. Brownfield policies and procedures, so that when people come to you with a project, they already know kind of the groundwork and the lay of the land here. Brownfields are a local program. There's a lot of local control for brownfields. So you can set your own policies, you can agree to do certain things in a brownfield, you don't have to do everything that's eligible in a brownfield, so you can tailor it to the needs of your community. And there's a lot of different incentives for redeveloping property. Some people want to create affordable housing, sometimes it's planning, there's job creation, infill development, blight removal, environmental cleanup, green infrastructure, historic preservation. There's a number of different things that can come into play on a brownfield. One of them that we'll talk about a little bit is public infrastructure. That's probably one of the ones that I like to focus on when working with communities. So what is brownfield development and kind of how does it work? So brownfield redevelopment is a tax increment financing program. So if you're not familiar with tax increment financing, it's the same way that most DDAs are funded. There's a base tax level that's fixed for the duration of the project. After development, the taxes are increased. You capture the increased taxes to reimburse for certain eligible activities. And then when those are done, all of the increased taxes go to all the taxing jurisdictions. So it's kind of, you're deferring what your tax revenue would be to support a project. And then after the developer's made whole, you get all the taxes. One of the nice things about brownfields and the tax capture is that you're capturing a lot of millages that you wouldn't normally see, right? So at the local level, you're capturing all the taxes through the county, all the way up through the county taxes. And so typically, those wouldn't come to your jurisdiction anyway, at least not directly.
Does the county have to approve that then?
No. Nope. The, when you public notice a brownfield plan, all the impacted millage holders, right, have the ability to come and talk, but they can't deny it. It's strictly up through the local taxes, approved at the local level. There are state taxes that can be captured. That has to go to one of three entities at the state, and we'll get to that in a minute. So what is brownfield redevelopment? So properties that qualify, they're contaminated, they can be functionally obsolete, they can be blighted, and there are specific definitions that go with those things. If it's a historic resource, it qualifies. Any property that's adjacent and contiguous to a property that qualifies can be included in a brownfield plan. So even if it wouldn't qualify on its own, if it touches a brownfield property, it can be included, providing the development of that enhances the development of the brownfield eligible property. Tax reverted property is brownfield eligible. Any property that's held by a land bank or has been held by a land bank qualifies. Transit oriented, which probably wouldn't come into play here as much as it would in a much larger city. And then housing property. Housing development was added as something that qualifies a property, and it was simply added as housing development without really any other definition.
Does adjacent and contiguous not mean across the road? Across an alley?
It can be across an alley. I'm not sure how across a road. Typically, we don't look at public thoroughfares as being, as separating a property for being contiguous.
Yeah. I didn't know about that one.
So, environmental activities, basically self-explanatory. Anything to do with environmental contamination is an eligible activity, whether that's investigating it, remediating it, or taking measures on site to make the property usable and be protective of users. Those all fall under EAGLE, which is the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. Any of the non-environmental activities, so these are things like demolition, asbestos abatement, site preparation, which could be clearing and grubbing, public infrastructure, and in some cases, some private infrastructure. Those activities, if you're gonna capture state taxes, have to go through the MEDC for approval. And then finally, the housing eligible activities include everything that's qualified under environmental and non-environmental. So infrastructure, site preparation, demolition, those all go through MISTA for approval, and MISTA takes a slightly different position on infrastructure. They don't distinguish between public infrastructure and private infrastructure. So any infrastructure, so if it's a private development and they're putting in a road and driveways and sidewalk that are gonna remain private, those still qualify as infrastructure for MISTA. They would not under MEDC. So one of the things you can do with a brownfield as an authority is you have the ability to capture some of the tax increment for administrative costs. So that can be, if you have a staff person that helps with your brownfield authority, it can be a portion of their salary. It can be used to hire outside consultants, for instance, someone like me. And then the authority can also capture and fund what's called a local brownfield revolving fund, or an LBRF. And these can be used for a lot of different purposes. They can fund any eligible activity on an eligible property, even if it's not in a brownfield plan. So the benefit of that, for instance, is the Hanchett property, right? That's a piece of contaminated property. If you needed to do some additional investigation on that, to position it for development, you could use the funds that you put into an LBRF from other brownfield projects to investigate further that property, or to do remediation. If you've tax foreclosed a gas station and you need to do investigation, it can fund those type of activities. But the other use is for developers to come to you and say, hey, you have this pot of money, you can make low interest loans, you can grant from it. And that's kind of where policies come into play, because it's a local program. So you might want to say, well, we'll fund up to X amount of dollars for this, or we'll pay for your due diligence, your phase 1, your phase 2, but we won't pay for this. So those are the types of things that we'll get into with policies and procedures later. So the Brownfield Authority can approach brownfields a couple different ways. There's no formal approval to set up a Brownfield Authority. You already have one. There's no other approvals needed at the local level other than it goes through you as the authority, and then it goes to the board. Once the board approves it, it's...
So our commission approved these members.
Sure, but I'm talking about also a brownfield plan.
Plan.
So if somebody comes to you with a brownfield plan, it comes to the Brownfield Authority.
Okay.
Your role is to review that plan, make sure that it meets the statute, that the activities are eligible, that it's reasonable, and then you recommend approval to your commission. Once the commission approves it, you can capture all the local taxes. If you're gonna go on and try and capture the state taxes, that's when you go to one of those other 3 agencies. So brownfield authorities can also use their LBRF or any other funds that they have access to conduct investigations on properties, position them for redevelopment. So a brownfield plan will approve the maximum amount that will be allowed to be captured. And so typically in a brownfield plan, those estimates are a little on the high side. And we do that so that if there's unexpected costs that come up, you don't have to come back and amend the plan. So you will approve a brownfield plan at, say, $1 million, knowing that it's probably gonna come in less than that. The developer does only get what they submit for reimbursement. They have to prove that they spent the money. So if they only spent $800,000, they're only going to get $800,000, even if the brownfield plan approved up to $1 million.
This was an issue that came up in our last session.
Okay.
Is how or who is qualified to deal with that? Do we send that to you and you study it and make sure they did what they promised they would do and that they're not inflated numbers and then you give it back to us and say it's a, so to speak? Is that how that works? Or
Are you talking on requests for reimbursement?
reimbursements, yes. How do those work?
So they'll have to provide proof that they paid contractors those funds.
Right, and the question was, who's here is qualified, like Brittany works in the treasurer's office, is gonna do the financial work of the brownfield, but she doesn't know whether it's a,
Construction.
Yeah,
So
so,
typically, you'll have a consultant that will help you do that.
Okay,
So we'll
that's what
go
I was
through
asking.
and line item everything, make sure that all the activities they're requesting were included in the brownfield plan to be eligible. Make sure that they line up with what was approved in the brownfield plan. There's a 15% contingency that's included pretty much on every single brownfield plan that's allowed under statute. That's just one of those mechanisms for slight increases here or there. Maybe you're removing contaminated soil and you run into a little more than you anticipated. So it allows you to do those kind of things without coming back and amending. But typically you'll have somebody that will help you on the consulting side, go through that, make sure all the activities are eligible and reasonable before reimbursing. And they have to provide proof that they incurred that cost. The actual cost is what gets returned to the developer or whoever spent the money, right? Because as a community, you can participate in a brownfield for certain activities if you want, and you can get reimbursed for them. And that's kind of where the public infrastructure part comes in.
Like if we were to help put in a bigger water line, that could be part of the TIF.
Absolutely.
That's what we're.
If that's needed for the development, so and that would
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
so if it's public infrastructure in the right of way, you could do that on any brownfield project because you're what we call a core community. That's eligible under MEDC. If it's specifically a housing project, you can also do that because that falls under MISHDA and that's infrastructure.
Gotcha.
So if it wasn't a housing development, but it was a brownfield, so they were doing a commercial development or an industrial development, because you're a core community, you can still do that because you're.
who gets paid back first? Is that an?
That's one of the things that you would enter into a development agreement with the developer that would talk about how that reimbursement is going to flow. Most communities will allow the developer to be reimbursed first and then get reimbursed after. But sometimes the communities say, look, we want 20% of the increment, you can have 80. Or they'll do it proportionally, right? So maybe the developer only has 500,000 in activities, but you're putting in a water main, it's gonna cost you 2 million, well, maybe you're gonna do it proportional, right? Whoever spent whatever amount gets that much.
That's all a negotiated thing.
That's all a
You know,
negotiated thing. It can also be in your policies.
That's up to the discretion of, well, what the developer agrees to and what the brownfield board approves.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and the commission.
Right, and the city commission, yep.
Yeah.
So if we have a developer who we like the less dense, piece, pretend. Today. And we like the less dense, they would want it to be as dense as they can so they can make all the more money, right?
Yes,
An
it
offer
also
to
generates
us?
more taxes.
Yes. Right, well,
Right,
this
so
is getting,
here's the scenario. for everybody.
Say it.
And this is what, probably the
You're gonna hear
first thing
about
we're
it eventually.
confronted with. So Alan Edwin Homes is buying 20 acres in the city, and they would like to put as many homes on there as sort of humanly possible, right? They would like to put 75. The mayor would like them to put 50.
Bigger lots, nicer neighborhood, you know.
Right. And so there's this ongoing, happened today, in fact, we met with them, sort of behind the scenes negotiation of number one, what could you actually get approved? What does zoning allow? All those types of things. But at some point, we had talked about, well, you know, if you're willing or entertaining the idea of putting in the 50, and could the city participate at a higher level on some of the infrastructure costs?
We can get that back on the TIF.
You can, or you can ask the developer to pay that cost and they get reimbursed for it.
Right, right.
You can say, if you
Some
want
different
that,
costs,
if you want
yeah.
that density, then you're gonna have to upgrade the sewer and the water.
Yeah, you're going the flip side of, if you want 70, you do it, and we're saying, if we are
Want 50,
saying,
we'll
please
do
do
it.
50, maybe we would do more. Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, that's where you could have that negotiation back and forth.
Okay,
On what it is you like. And then you have to look at some of the other benefits to the community, right? That greater density means less sprawl.
well, here, I certainly don't want to dominate this,
Yeah.
I just have lots of questions.
We were deluged today with it.
So, in terms of process, this development, very real thing that's coming our way, they have to go through the planning commission. They have to, you know, the planning commission sends it to them. When do they start the Brownfield process? Is this all concurrent, or is it?
Usually it is concurrent to some degree. They'll do some of the initial planning and they'll run some of the estimates of what the tax increment is going to look like in terms of revenue per year that would be available to capture. They typically will try and get it so that they both kind of reach approval at the same time.
Okay,
So one of the things that they would be interested in talking to you about would be, how likely are you to approve this as a brownfield, right? Because they're not gonna wanna invest the time and money to prepare all those things and write a brownfield plan and bring it to your authority unless they were fairly certain it was going to be approved.
How do we separate the monetary conversation and like the feelings about how we feel about it? I mean, how do we as a group separate those two things? Or are
So,
we only supposed to look at the money? We're not supposed to decide how we feel about the project?
no, it's a local program, so you absolutely can have different things that you would prefer to provide that incentive to than others. Right, so
That's the key.
if somebody came in and said, I wanna build 3 giant houses, you might say, that's not what we're looking for here. We're not gonna approve a brownfield plan for that. Conversely, you might say, well, 75 is too dense, but maybe we can talk 60 or 65, right? Right, exactly. And so that's because it's a local program. That's where you can, and you can have policies and procedures that talk to that you'll incent different things at different levels based on what the community would like to see. For instance, some communities have looked at the housing TIF and said, we'll allow infrastructure and we'll allow interest, because they can ask for interest on what doesn't get reimbursed every year. We'll allow that if you have X number of units that are held as, 80% AMI, area median income, to make them affordable or attainable for 10 years or whatever.
This is gonna become so complicated, Mark, that, because they are talking about all those things you just talked about.
yeah.
And we're like, yeah, you know.
So essentially, that's where we tap in a consultant for the brownfield.
well, that's why we're lucky we have a smart group of people here.
If you don't,
Yeah.
you're gonna get burned.
So those are the types of evaluations you would make, right? You would say, if you're gonna have this many units, then we'll allow you to we'll have interest. If you're gonna do this many, then we'll approve infrastructure or match it. Right, so you can have policies that talk to that.
When does the planning commission talk to the brownfield? How does that work?
Typically, they don't.
So how do you,
Tim's on
Typically,
both.
they don't.
So,
We have one on both.
Yeah, and that's fine. There is kind of some overlap. But nothing's gonna get built without the planning commission, right?
Right.
So they're gonna wanna make sure that they're gonna get their site plan approval before they finalize a brownfield on it. Because they need to know what they can build. They need to know what numbers to go in that's gonna calculate that tax increment that determines what the length of reimbursement is.
The whole issue is 2 of their plans require a zoning change.
And sometimes on projects like that, they'll try and you'll do a PUD because it's,
Oh, yeah, we're talking about that.
yeah.
Found it somewhere.
So, because the developer doesn't get reimbursed until the project starts generating tax increment, that's their incentive to get the project done and get it done quickly. Because the sooner it's completed, the sooner it gets assessed, the sooner it starts generating that tax increment. And there's very little risk to you as a community, because if they don't build it, they don't get reimbursed for anything.
When you say soon, you mean, is that a time period? What kind of a time period are you talking about?
Well, it depends on how they want to build it, really. But they're going to want to try and build as much as they can, as quickly as they can, so that it starts generating that revenue, as opposed to waiting for like 10 years, right? Because brownfield plans can only last up to 30 years. And so the longer they wait, the fewer years there are for it to generate that tax increment to get reimbursed. And that's another thing communities often do, is they will put a time limit. They'll say, we'll allow you to capture for 15 years or 10 years. And whatever you can capture in that time frame, but beyond that, if you haven't recouped your money, you're out of luck.
What's the average, Trevor, for a housing development? 10 years, 12 years? Is that what we're hearing, Mark?
This is a new
It really
thing.
depends. It depends on how it's gonna be assessed. You know, if the base taxable value is really high because it's already got a decent tax base, then it's not gonna generate much income.
I see.
If it's vacant property,
Vacant land.
sitting really low on the tax rolls, and they are building something, then it's gonna produce a lot more
I
taxes.
see. So it'd be a shorter.
So it's, yeah, absolutely, and so it's very project specific. It's hard to say
Okay.
whether it's gonna take 5 years, 10, or 20.
See.
But a lot of times you'll tie that, if you're going to cap the number of years, you'll tie it to what the Brownfield plan estimates, right? So you'll look at the tax increment financing tables and say, they think that if they build it within this time frame, they'll be reimbursed within 15 years. You might say, well, then we'll let you capture for 18, right? Give a little buffer, but beyond that, you're out of luck. So they can come back and try and amend it later and say, hey, you know, the economy didn't increase, and so there weren't the taxes we thought, but you can deal with that down the road.
Does the contractor or developer prepare the plan?
So different authorities do it differently. Some authorities say we want our consultant to prepare the brownfield plan. What's more common is that the developer will have a consultant that will prepare the plan and submit it to the brownfield authority, and then you'll have a consultant that reviews it and works with you and them to come to a final product.
They like fleece. We've done projects with fleece.
Your developer?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm reviewing one of their plans now. We've reviewed other of their plans.
Okay,
So we're familiar with how their plans are put together.
okay.
So your primary purpose, right, is to redevelop eligible properties and create that kind of economic opportunity. So the Brownfield Authority reviews and approves or recommends approval to the City Commission. And then the City Commission will determine, or the Brownfield Authority will determine, you know, what administrative costs they think they want to include. You can include nothing. You can capture nothing for administrative. You can capture, you know, what's fairly common is about 10% of the tax increment. To help defray. There are also limits to what you can capture based on how many active plans you have. So you have up to 5 active plans, you can capture 120,000 a year in aggregate from all of those plans. You're not gonna do that from one plan because it would probably use up all the tax increment. So 10% is fairly common as a capture. You can capture, again, at the end for your LBRF. You can also capture during the plan if you want for your LBRF. You could say, we're gonna capture 10% for admin, we're gonna capture 10% to fund our LBRF, so you start getting some of that revenue in early. And then we'll let the developer have 80%. What happens is the more that you capture, the longer their payback is. And so that's when they're gonna say, well, that's fine, but then we really need the interest because we're carrying those costs for more years. So it becomes a negotiation. Brownfield authorities actually have quite a lot of power. You can enter into contracts, you can buy property, you can sell property, you can buy it and lease it, you can accept funds from pretty much any source and put them into your LBRF. So the city could preload that LBRF by putting money into it, so that the Brownfield Authority could spend it on eligible activities within the community. I don't think, yeah, I did put it in here. You actually have the ability to issue bonds. I don't think your city commissioner is gonna want you to,
No.
but the Brownfield Authority has that power.
So who does all that work, those last three lines, our city attorney?
So your attorney would be involved, but typically the Brownfield Authority would say, you know what, we have 300,000 in our LBRF from these other projects, and there's this really cool piece of property that's coming up for sale downtown, and we want to control what goes there. So they can buy it.
I see.
They can hold it, and then they could say, let's put out an RFP to a developer and say, this is what we would like a developer to come in and do. So you can control the process that way. So the impact can be quite varied. By policies and procedures, you can kind of steer brownfield projects to support things that you want to see as a community. Brownfield redevelopment, by definition, just redeveloping properties that have some kind of an impairment, enhances the local economy. You know, if it's housing, you're bringing people in that are gonna live there that might go to your schools, which increases the amount of money the schools get from pupil counts. They'll spend their money in the community at grocery stores. There's all kinds of benefits to bringing more people into a community. On the tax capture side, you're capturing all the taxes that you wouldn't normally, all the way up through county taxes. And that's helps reimburse everything. Development tends to spur other development. So if somebody does a project and now there's more people, somebody might open a restaurant because now suddenly there's more people looking to go out and do that kind of thing. So all in all, the whole point of this program is to then grow the diversity of the tax base, because if it's a commercial development, then they're gonna want restaurants, and if housing, and then people want to live near where they work, so it all kind of ties together. In terms of structuring your Brownfield Authority, we've kind of touched on this already. You'll, like any other authority, you'll have bylaws, you'll have rules for how you're going to look at things. Typically, you're gonna wanna have regular meetings, but if you don't have any projects that are ongoing, a lot of authorities, as they're getting started, will just hold meetings as they need to. There's no requirement that you hold a meeting every month. Some communities have a Brownfield Authority meeting every 3 months or every 6 months. And then we'll call a special meeting if they have a need to. But again, it's how do you want to run your program? Policies and procedures, 2 benefits. One, you already know you're going to lay out the types of activities that you're interested in, how you want to run your program. But you'll post it on your website, so developers coming to the community will know ahead of time, hey, here's kind of the parameters within which we have to operate.
Why did the last Brownfield really fall apart? Was it all just because Bobby left? Why did I don't even know why we just fell apart.
Well, we never had any applications, Emily. I mean, we had the inspiration behind getting it going. Well, I'll start over. We operated under a county brownfield authority. The previous administration thought, well, we really need to have our own. Then started one with the idea that we're gonna have applications and plans for the Hanchett property.
Yep.
And we never got any. So that was, then it just languished in that there was no project.
I think when Tim was looking at it, one of his initial statements was, there's no brownfield. He's like, I'm not even gonna.
Right.
They weren't in housing at that time.
No, well, they weren't in housing, but I think what Tim, your brother-in-law, who's a developer, just so everybody knows, is very attuned to all this, and I think was saying the LBRF has no money.
Oh.
Right? He's probably very used to going into places and it's, Ann Arbor, whatever, they have, what do they have in the LBRF in Ann Arbor? Probably a lot of money.
Yeah, it varies from having all been allocated to properties up to about 2 million.
Yeah, right, so I think he was saying, you guys got nothing, right? Whereas, he was used to other ways. That was my interpretation of it.
Policies and procedures are where you're gonna lay out kind of what your administrative capture is gonna be, how you're gonna fund your LBRF. Are you gonna capture during the reimbursement period, or are you gonna wait to the end? Because what the statute says is that you can capture for up to 5 years after the developer has been reimbursed. So a lot of authorities will wait and capture at the end of the brownfield plan so that they can get the developer reimbursed and out of the picture. The limit is up to 5 years and no more than what was eligible in the brownfield plan. So if the brownfield plan was $1 million in eligible activities, in year 15, 16, 17, it may be kicking out a lot more tax increment. You may hit that $1 million limit in 3 years. So that's how it's capped. Application fees, that's another way to help fund the review of plans. You can put an application fee out. So a developer would fill out an application, would send it into the Brownfield Authority and say, hey, here's the project I want to do. Here's what my capital investment's going to be. Here's what my job creation's going to be, or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times that fee is tied to the total project cost. So if they're doing a $2 million project, it may be a $1,500 application fee. If they're doing a $20 million project, maybe it's a $5,000 fee. And you can use that to then, right. And the other thing you could do is you can have them set up an escrow to pay the consulting fee. So a lot of communities do that with site plan reviews, right? So a lot of communities do that. If somebody comes and says, hey, I want to do this, here's my site plan, you send it off to your engineer, they're often paid through an escrow. So you can do the same thing with a brownfield authority, so that you don't have any out-of-pocket costs. Or you can set it up so you don't, otherwise you do. And that's kind of it. That's
So simple.
it is. that, in a nutshell, that's how it works, right? So,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
We contract with Fleece and Van Brink as a city,
Yeah.
and say a potential brownfield client also is comfortable with you guys. Is there ever a conflict of interest in that scenario, like a law firm would have one? You're
Well, if both parties
representing on both
agree with
sides.
it, it's not a conflict.
Okay. So,
So, but if the authority is uncomfortable with that, then you can say, go find a consultant. Or you could retain somebody else to review the plan.
okay.
It really depends. You can run it however you want. I've done it all of those ways before. So. There are some communities that have their consultant write all the brownfield plans. Very rarely will they accept a plan from an outside consultant.
Does that get pricey though?
Does which way get pricey?
Having the Brownfield Authority having their
Well, if
consultant?
they're established, then they probably have an LBRF.
So then it's a
They can
non-issue.
pay- But then they can also they also can capture that back, because writing brownfield plans is an eligible activity.
Okay,
So the cost to write that plan, they can capture that. In addition to the administrative costs and the LBRF, they can get reimbursed through the tax increment. The same way you would if you put in public infrastructure and you got reimbursed for that, you would be getting reimbursed for the other.
Theirs already have its bylaws done and all that stuff.
I don't think we
We'll
have.
probably work on updating those.
If
We
there,
have them somewhere?
it,
Found some old ones, yeah.
I think we would only have bylaws. I can't imagine we have policies and procedures or anything.
And I can help you with the policies and procedures.
Okay.
I can give you kind of a cafeteria plan, say, here's how communities handle this typically, and you can say, oh, we like doing it this way.
Can you give us like 3 examples of things that have actually been done with numbers, so we can like look at that and how that process went? I mean,
In terms of numbers for what?
any
All
project,
goes.
Case study.
yeah,
Case study.
Yeah, what was one,
Community our size.
yeah, like step by step, and I mean, even if it was just the money, I'd love to know.
I can get you one. Off the top of my head, it would be a little difficult. Because I've done brownfield plans where, so I recently reviewed a plan for a community who the developer was getting 500,000 in eligible activities. And the community was putting in $2 million worth of public infrastructure. The developer is getting, well, I guess it's public record, I can tell you. The developer's reimbursement is only like 6 years. The community is capturing out to about year 20 to get the 2 million back. So,
All in a tiff.
yeah.
Is it legal?
But the nice thing about that is, what's funding that, so the community is paying for that out of their general fund. But the tax increment is the county taxes, county police, county fire, jail, all those millages that you would not normally be getting, you are getting through the brownfield.
Through the brownfield. But we have to notify all those people.
You only
who
have
got
to
through your
notify
brownfield.
them.
Huh?
You only have to notify them.
That's it.
They can come and say, we don't like this, but you can still approve it. They can't deny it. So the brownfield statute says you have to
Schools
capture,
aren't included, correct?
to capture school tax, you have to go to Eagle, MEDC, or MISTA. And then you're capturing the 18 mills of school tax and the 6 mills of SET.
We would do that.
You would do
That
that.
would hurt your school system
It does not hurt your school system at all.
because they weren't getting it
it's money
anyway.
that's not being generated currently, but
They
would
were never
potentially
getting
be.
No, actually, schools are funded by the number of pupils that are there on count day.
With the 18 mills,
Doesn't matter. Your 18 mills and everybody's 18 mills in the state go into a pot, and then it gets distributed based on the number of pupils on count day. So if you suddenly had 200 extra students, you would get that much more
okay.
to your school. If there's a shortfall in that bucket at the state level, the state has to make it whole from its general fund. So it does not impact your school.
Okay.
They're called school taxes because that's what they go to the state for, but it does not impact what you get in your schools.
Okay.
On a housing development, it can be for sale units, it can be rental units, they can be market rate, they can be below a certain area median income. When they're private, when they're sold, then they're homesteaded, and homestead properties don't pay the 18 mills. So typically on a homesteaded project, you're not gonna capture state school tax because there's very little there to get. There's 6 mills of SET. You have to return 3 mills of the SET to the state on every single brownfield because that's how they fund their LD.
Oh,
So you could,
simple.
so you could go through the whole process, and it's a much longer review period. You have to write another plan. After the brownfield plan is approved, you have to write what's called a 381 work plan. That goes to the agency. They have up to like 60 days to review it. So it's a much longer process, and you can't do any physical work on the property other than investigation work before you have your approvals in place. There is an ability to do a look back for certain things, but that's yet another step you have to go through, so. So it's not worth going all through that to capture only 3 mils of the SCD. If they're leased units, then the 18 mils is paid. It's only Homestead that doesn't pay it.
I think there's a high chance these could be, can't imagine selling $54,000 homes.
So
No,
that's,
as a whole rental division.
they do, but here's the thing, part of that project could be market rate, part of it could be for sale, and part of it could be leased. And the leased properties can be, so there's another calculation that's only eligible on housing development properties, and that's a financing gap calculation. It's a housing subsidy. So if your development is 120% of AMI or less, so you're gonna hold a unit at 80% of AMI. AMI is area median income. MISTA publishes tables of what that is in different areas of the state. So if you're gonna say, hey, we're gonna hold 10 units for 10 years at 80% AMI, then there's a calculation, MISTA has a formula that says, here's what you would have gotten, essentially, if it was market rate. Here's what you're going to get, and that difference becomes an eligible reimbursement. So it makes the developer whole, but the community gets a benefit in that people that work in the community can now afford to either buy a house or rent somewhere in the community.
So nothing in Brownfield TIF has anything to do with, though, income of who they sell it to.
No, unless they're getting the housing calculation. If they're doing the housing subsidy, then that's based on household
Did they
income.
talk about it, Mark?
They did talk about that because if they do, at least this is what they said to us, Trevor, is that if they do some income qualified units, there's another level of things that become an eligible activity.
And
That's
that's,
what you were just
that's what
talking
I
about.
just described.
That's
That's
different.
that
Okay,
calculation.
that's what that was.
That's that gap
That's the
calculation.
gap, okay, all right, got it.
Also, though, the obligation is then on the Brownfield Authority every year to verify that they are still in compliance. So you would, part of your reimbursement agreement would be
The vice
that the
chair's job.
developer has,
We're both looking at Rick.
part of your reimbursement would, agreement with the developer would be they have to provide you those metrics so that you can review them.
It really gets
And deadlines
complicated
for
then.
the-
Oh,
It does, but there are also groups out there that do that for housing commissions, because, you know, cities that have a housing commission that run housing programs that are rent controlled, they have to do the same thing. And so there are consulting firms that you can pay with the tax increment, right, with your administrative capture to do those kind of reviews, and it's not that much. If the developer's providing all the metrics, it's not that much. But it is your obligation to do that.
What if they're not in compliance?
Well, then they don't get that reimbursement because they're no longer qualified for it.
Do they have like a grace period to make it right, or?
Not in the statute. That could be in your procedures.
so, the housing authority owns the land, right, and they're selling it to this developer. Do they have any rights at all, or is it strictly up to the city of Big Rapids and their Brownfield to do this Brownfield TIF? Does the housing commission have any say or rights or anything?
Not on whether or not a Brownfield authority approves a plan.
Okay. I was always.
They can come
That goes.
and present that, hey, we think this is a great project and we want you to support it.
Okay, but they have.
Like any other public or private person can come in and publish
But
comment.
the housing commission can't do a Brownfield TIF. They're a housing commission, right? It has to be a city or a township.
Well, the thing is, when it's owned by the housing commission, it's typically a non-taxable property. So there's no increment to capture,
I gotcha.
right?
Yeah, I got
So in
it.
the same way that, you know, you might build a new police station on a former contaminated site, you can't, there's no brownfield TIF there because you're not paying taxes.
So there's no taxes to
There's
capture?
no taxes to capture, there's no reimbursement, right?
Yeah.
But your LBRF could do it. and clean it up. You wouldn't be able to capture it back, but that's what the LBRF is for.
I see, you'd use it.
That goes to justifying keeping a brownfield authority in existence long enough to keep a nice LBRF.
Well, and that's why it benefits a community to have the Brownfield Authority, because if you were still a part of your county authority, the county would hold the LBRF, the County Brownfield Authority, and they can then spend that on any of the communities that they represent.
Still have it, Mark?
I think so. They don't have any projects. I don't know if they can, they must have an LBRF. I don't know what's in it, maybe.
So here's the thing also with a county, let's say somebody says, I don't think you as an authority are going to approve my plan, so I'm gonna short circuit you and go to the county. The County Brownfield Authority could recommend approval, but before it would go to the county board, it has to come to,
Our brownfield.
no, it has to come to your city commission. And your city commission could say, nope.
Deal with our brownfield.
Right. Exactly.
Interesting, that's
They
an
could say,
interesting little.
no, and if you wanna do this, you come through our Brownfield Authority. Or you can just say, we don't like it. So we represent a small community up north, that started a Brownfield Authority because they approved a Brownfield plan at the local level that went through the County Brownfield Authority. And it went through so County Brownfield Authority recommended approval, it went to the community board approved it, or the council approved it. It went to the county board, and the county board turned it down. And the local community said, hey, this was a project we wanted, we approved it, we liked it, why are you killing it? So they formed their own Brownfield Authority, so they could do it.
Gosh.
So they'd have the authority to control what's going on in their community.
Right, and so that's why I say it's a local program. You can tailor it to what your needs are.
Here's what I would suggest, if that's all right. You can look at our bylaws,
Yeah,
please.
Does he have to have a 3-bid thing? Do we have to do that with us?
No,
We already
no.
have a contract.
Yeah, we have a contract with them.
Checking.
No, they,
That's that question.
but our
Yeah, it's a
proposal
good
is also
question.
to help you with policies and procedures.
well, no, that was my second thing. I don't remember, there was like 4 things on there, but we probably ought to go, one step at a time. But if you could look at our bylaws
Yep,
and maybe give us some draft policies and procedures.
yep.
And I sort of liked Emily's thing, and maybe it's not appropriate for you to give us Grayling's Brownfield plan, but I could call Grayling, and they could give it to us. And this whole case study thing might be fun to actually see what one looks like.
Well, and a lot of Brownfield authorities put their Brownfield plans that they've approved on their website.
Oh,
So for instance, you can go to Washtenaw counties and you can download any Brownfield plan that's been approved in Washtenaw County.
oh, well, there we
You can
go.
So it's public.
Yeah,
I think Grand Traverse County does that, Leelanau County probably does.
Number of
There's a number of.
so we could
Brownfield
have some
authorities.
case studies that we could look at.
It's Kalamazoo, City of Kalamazoo.
You could,
In English or in?
Right?
It's typically the larger communities that do that.
okay,
But you'll find smaller communities that put the plans up as well. And even if they didn't, it's probably, if you go to the minutes, or go to the packet that went to the local unit of government, be it a council or
yeah,
whatever,
we could.
it will
Chelsea's
be in their packet.
and all sorts of stuff like that.
Do you, make a comment about a Oprah followed by a Brownfield or?
So you can put the two together. So an OPRA is an Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act project.
That's that theater we're all talking about.
Correct. And so an OPRA is, it basically abates the local taxes for between 10 and 12 years. So there's no tax to capture in that time period.
So there's no capture. He just gets a break.
Right, but you can start your tax capture in year 10 when the OPRA expires, and then capture the increment to reimburse for the brownfield activities.
We lost all that taxable income for those 10 years.
You did.
Why do we want to do that?
So have
To
them-
incent the.
Oh, to have him do it, to incentivize him to do it.
Correct.
We gotta think about that one though.
Gives them grace to pushing in his
It was like up
pocket.
to 12 years, wasn't it, or something?
10 to 12, yeah.
Well, it's up to 12, right?
It's up to 12.
Yeah,
Well, usually you see 10 or 12.
yeah, we've done it, we did one for 5 is
Did we?
only.
What did we do that on?
Social Security building,
Really?
it's 5 years, yeah,
Gerber.
for Gerber.
So you had mentioned on our website, we have like our application fee. I mean, does that go through the
Well, you don't, but
city, or-
you would probably, if, once you have policies and procedures, you would put a link on your website to here are Brownfield policies and
Like the
procedures.
city's website, or we have our own website?
We would have,
However you wanna do it, but
Yes,
it
you
would
have-
probably would be, if you went to, usually it would be the city, then you would go to boards and commissions, you would see Brownfield Authority, you would go there, and then there would be a link to, there would be a link to policies and procedures and all that kind of stuff. And an application that would lay out, here's the fees you have to pay to apply.
Gotcha. Whole ADA compliant thing with my website. I can't even think about
Yeah, think about that again.
Yeah. But that's also
They want it.
part of the administrative cost, so if you needed to have an IT professional do that to your website, you can pay them with your administrative capture.
You pay use salaries, pay salaries.
You can pay proportional to the work they're doing on the Brownfield Authority, yes. So if 20% of their time is spent on the Brownfield Authority, 20% of, yeah.
But all of your fees would be eligible.
Sure, and you can either do that and get reimbursed for it, you can do that out of admin, or you can put it on the developer and have them get reimbursed for it.
Refresh me on the 10% of city expenses, and then if you had 5 plans going, it's a max of 120,000. What are those expenses?
So that's your administrative capture, so that would be if you wanted to pay a consultant to do something.
So there's a limit though.
So you have annual reporting requirements, somebody's gonna have to do that, either you're gonna do it or your consultant's gonna do it.
Brittany does it now, but Brittany does it now.
Yeah, and so you're familiar with MEDC's website for report, yeah, it's fun.
That's 10% of the,
Zero.
Well, when you have no projects,
10% of the project cost, right?
no, it's 10% of the tax increment that's available to be reimbursed, and it's not always 10%. You know, sometimes people only capture 5%. It really depends on the project and how much tax increment it's producing.
Okay.
It's like a bookkeeping nightmare too, besides.
So brownfield plans so they're tax tables that will list every single millage and then what the incremental tax is in year 1, year 2, year 3, right? And we typically step that up 1 to 2% every year, the taxable value. That calculates all the millages, that calculates what the tax increment revenues are. That's how you know how much will be available to be reimbursed. It goes into a reimbursement table that breaks out how that's gonna be distributed. These are estimates, right? It's based on what we think the taxable value is going to be. What happens is the property gets developed and then there's an actual assessment. And now you have a real number. That base taxable value is correct. But every year you have to look at what is the taxable value, what is the actual difference between the base tax and the new taxable value, and every year you're calculating what that increment is across all those millages.
Are most city assessors into
The
this?
treasurer.
Sounds
Or
like
the
the
finance
assessor,
director.
sounds like the assessor has to not be involved.
Well, the assessor is simply assessing the property. They're setting what becomes the taxable value. They're doing the assessment.
Every year?
No. No.
So that
Well, yeah, I mean,
its value
properties
goes
get,
up.
properties get reassessed.
It's done every year, Mayor.
Yeah, properties get reassessed every year, but there's also inflationary things that change
Okay.
that. But yeah, pretty much. So it's gonna change every year.
And if you goof up on all that paperwork and all the finance and stuff, you go to prison or what? There's gotta be somebody, there's gotta be something here that can monitor these things. Or you could really run a scam out of this.
It's probably your audit.
I don't know how you,
Audit goes-
because that's part of your reporting requirements, so. It's a pretty straightforward calculation.
You don't know.
It's a pretty straightforward calculation. Here's the taxable value.
Yeah,
here's
just
what
simple,
the base
it's
was.
just simple.
Here's the difference. Run that down all the millages.
trust your numbers, guys. Right?
Yeah.
If we thought we were gonna get an application in the next 60 days, what do we need to have in place to be prepared for that?
Really a basic understanding of how the Brownfield works, how the Brownfield program works. I can help you with the rest of it. You don't have to have policies and procedures. You can run them on a case-by-case basis. The point of having policies and procedures really is to help developers write a plan that's going to be more acceptable to you without a lot of back and forth. But you can do whatever you want, really.
So they could file one today. You don't have an application or a fee, but that wouldn't stop them to
wouldn't
file
stop
one.
them, no.
Right,
It would be
and,
hard to go back and say, oh, now we want you to pay a fee. But you could say you need to set up an escrow. You could say you need to fund an escrow with $10,000, and that's gonna pay all the consulting fees, and include that in your brownfield plan as an eligible activity.
How much is the typical application fee?
Anywhere from about 1,500 to 5 to 7 to 10, depends on, I've seen application fees that get pretty high, but it might be $100,000 project, $100 million project.
So it's based on the scope of the project?
Typically, it's based on the total investment, total project cost. So they'll say, hey, we're doing a $200 million project. We're gonna develop this entire city block, blah, blah, blah.
$225.
And that's,
How much is the hookup fee?
No, I said then they get to go to planning commission for $225.
oh goodness.
Okay, we better get rolling, because they're in a hurry a
Yeah,
little bit.
I think 60 to 90 days probably, we'll probably see an application. That's kind of what we're thinking.
yeah, and it's probably about a 3-month process from the time your brownfield authority gets a brownfield plan and you review it. You vote on it at the authority, you public notice it, it goes to the, so it's a process.
And so, how much staff do you have to do this? I mean, if you're running 10 brownfields at a time,
So, there's about 4 of us that do a lot of this, but again, it's periodic. And once you have it established, it's not that difficult to stay on top of it. Because I do other stuff too, I do regular environmental work, so.
Well, folks, it's up to you on what
Sure
you
do.
think you need to be ready. I don't wanna be pushy on it.
I think, like you said, we have to look at the bylaws, maybe get some studies.
And some
Procedures.
draft policies and procedures that you can look at it and,
Yep.
Do you have that available or done in 30 days, Trevor, or?
absolutely,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, do we wanna try to set like an established monthly meeting? Or how do you wanna do that?
it's up to these folks.
Board?
Just don't make it the second Thursday of every month, because I already have another brownfield authority.
Okay.
The second Thursday.
Every month. That's the authority I sit on.
Oh, the Washington, yeah.
What about today? Is the, what, fourth Tuesday?
Yeah.
Works for me.
That was the easiest thing we've ever done.
Because it's a nighttime meeting.
And there's no other city meeting?
So the fourth Tuesday, Trevor, is May 27th.
Say it slowly for Trevor, because he's
May 27th at 6:30. And we could be having sort of revised, in theory, we could have maybe some potential revisions to bylaws. We could have some draft policies and procedures.
That's the day after Memorial Day, so you might have people that are on vacation.
Yeah, well.
I can be there.
we don't do vacations up here.
No.
We're working people.
But the day up here is a vacation. What are you talking about?
I think Amanda and I are
You
gonna
like it
keep
here.
coming just to learn.
Absolutely.
We're not planning on.
We'll sit in the
doing
crowd
anything,
next
but
time so we can shut up.
We need to understand it a little bit, cause we're gonna have the theater next pretty quickly, I think, we hope.
I don't know.
And that one will have contamination.
What an excellent live action case study for how to make the
Now
park
we'll
go.
get the other kind.
Well, he's so nice too.
And if you have other stuff that comes up, you can send me an email and You know, if you say, hey, we'd also like to see this, let me know.
Sure. Are you sending out the thing, Michelle?
Meeting invite.
A meeting invite, yes, I will send you a meeting.
Don't have him do it, he doesn't get it
Oh,
right.
yeah, that's right. Yup.
Oh, that was June.
Are you gonna contact that community, Brownfield?
Oh, Dad, we get to meet on your birthday.
Yes, the studies, the case studies, we will find some.
Okay.
Yeah, because I would love to study
I
them.
can help.
I didn't know if he was
I
gonna.
can help you send you some.
Yeah, well, we will. dig some
Sometimes
up.
it's a good learning tool.
Is there like meeting minutes to those? Because it would be nice to know like what their discussion was.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I'm sure we can find them. That's a
I
good
like the
idea.
numbers, but the meeting minutes would be.
Well, the bigger communities might even have it videotaped the same way we do.
City of Grand Rapids is gonna have a Brownfield development meeting sometime within the next 15 hours. And I don't know exactly, but it's coming right up. If it's online, just go to the City of Grand Rapids and you can watch their video.
How would you know
I
that?
was gonna say, the fact that you know that means you should have been there.
Videos on
Worrying about
Sandbugger,
I
right?
watch a lot of that city
You couldn't
stuff.
lead with that?
Well, he doesn't want to be in the chair.
Yeah, I'm from.
Who you men? That button.
That's crazy.
Technically, the meeting hasn't been closed yet.
Oh, yeah.
Try to see some of that before you know, just, what's it about? I don't know. So, yeah, it's
I'm
great.
proud of you, Tim.
Really? Because I'm a little bit mad.
Okay, we're done. Are we done? Brownfield Committee?
You gotta bang the
I have
gavel.
a gavel.
Public comment.
All right.
I have a question, do we have to go with this kind of an agenda? I mean, is it,
It's up to the committee. It's their committee.
well, but
Your committee.
you know, with the,
Does it mean and all that?
I mean, do you have to
Mark
have
likes
people, do you have people comments?
Oh, I think you have to have public comment.
It's always a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we can limit their time.
Well, yes.
These
Miracle.
agenda.
Holy, they
You
better.
keep doing that, or you want me to do that?
No, I do that.
Minutes.
Really, the board chair just comes and runs the meeting.
Yeah, you're-
Like, we do all the prep work for it.
Oh, I do on my own for the city council.
Oh, yes.
You're the mayor.
Votes of the.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you,
You're
Trevor.
very welcome.
Thanks for dinner.
It's way too complicated, though. It gives you a headache. I don't have a headache.
If I can figure it out, you can figure it out.
Oh,
Thank you. Go home and enjoy your family.
Have a good night.
yeah, thank you.